welcome to the Denver Planning Board meeting for August 7th, 2019. We'll first move to approval of the meeting records. The first meeting record is from July 10th, 2019. We do have 5 members present who were present at that meeting.
Motion to approve the July 10th meeting record.
Second.
It's been moved by Susan, seconded by Don. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And those not present are assumed to be abstaining? Okay. Denver 8, I'm being told in the room that my mic can't be heard well in the room. It's on, but perhaps the volumes need to be adjusted.
It's better now than it was a minute ago. That's
okay.
Good.
The next meeting record we have for approval is the amended meeting record that has a green dot on it for July 17th, 2019. There are 5 members here who were present then. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the July 17th meeting record.
Second.
Been moved by Susan and seconded. Don, were you at that meeting?
I think I was.
Yes, you were. Yes,
but,
you were.
But I read it and I confirmed it, but I wasn't aware there was another amended meeting record. What was the nature of the amendment that made?
I had left the room at some point just on a comfort break, and It was noted originally that I had recused the item.
Okay, so it had nothing to do with the long Aaron Clark amendment reading of the language in that.
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, okay. Then on my second stands. That's
okay,
good.
It's been moved by Susan and seconded by Don. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And those not present are assumed to be abstaining. Okay, we have a consent item on the agenda. When we have very straightforward, non-controversial topics that clearly meet the criteria, and we've heard nothing from the public suggesting that anyone is going to speak negatively, we consider putting it on the consent agenda, but we always offer to remove it from the consent agenda if someone comes to speak on it. Is there anyone here who's specifically come to speak to the Planning Board about a map amendment, a rezoning at 3141 Raleigh Street? I don't have any yellow slips for that. Okay, well, if there's no objections by the Planning Board, we can take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Aaron and seconded by Susan to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. And we're on to item 5 of the agenda, the Loretto Heights Area Plan. This is a public hearing to approve with conditions, or deny the Loretto Heights Area Plan and transmit its decision to the CPD Executive Director, Mayor, and City Council. This is a public hearing, and the public hearing is open. If you're here to speak to this topic, or any topic that's a public hearing or public meeting, please fill out a little yellow slip in the back and return it to Heidi at the side of the room. The staff report will be given by Jason Morrison.
Chair, I'll be recusing myself on this. I've done work with the developer client on this, and I don't want to give a hint of impropriety.
Thank you for disclosing.
Okay, great. All right. Good afternoon, Planning Board members. Jason Morrison, Senior City Planner with Community Planning and Development. And I'm here today to present the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan. This is a very exciting planning effort that's been taking place in Southwest Denver that's really the first of its kind for the community and one of the most iconic and unique areas in all of Denver. On the heels of the recent sale of the 72-acre former Loretto Heights campus, CPD has been working with local residents and stakeholders since the fall of 2018 to create a community vision for this important piece of Southwest Denver. Our agenda today focuses on 2 objectives. First, I want to start off by giving you an overview of the structure of the plan. 2 weeks ago, I walked you through some of the content of the plan, but I want to spend some time today to focus on some of the key concepts that are of particular interest. Next, we'll present the review criteria, and we will document the following: how an inclusive community process was used to develop the plan, how the plan is consistent with the vision, goals, and strategies of Comprehensive Plan 2040, and finally, how the plan demonstrates a long-term vision. At this time, I also want to acknowledge Jenny Buddenborg, who will be helping with the presentation today. And as you know, the site is very rich in history, and so for this reason, and for the very first time, the project team includes a Denver landmark preservation planner who assisted facilitating this discussion throughout the process. The framework for this area plan follows the 6 vision elements contained in the recently adopted Comprehensive Plan 2040. Those 6 vision elements are on the screen here. This area plan uses these vision elements to guide the plan and ensure each recommendation or strategy applies to at least one or more of the 6 vision elements. Keeping this in mind, the steering committee refined the ideas and concepts within each vision element based on relevancy to the Loretto Heights planning area to create vision statements. The result is a series of statements within each element that is consistent with the citywide vision, while at the same time defining what each element means specifically for the Loretto Heights planning area. Similarly, Blueprint Denver identifies 3 elements that form a complete neighborhood. Complete neighborhoods are equitable. They're accessible to everyone, regardless of age, ability, or income. And there are 3 interrelated elements that form the foundation of a complete neighborhood, and that is land use and built form, mobility, and quality of life infrastructure. The planning process has used these 3 elements to shape conversations and evaluate feedback. The area plan also uses these elements to provide structure to the draft plan and create sections for the recommendations and strategies. So I'd like to transition now to walking you through some of the key recommendations within each topic, and the first section is land use and built form. The community has reiterated from day one that they want to live and visit a plan area that does a number of things. First, it allows for different types of land uses, including office, commercial, retail, and different types and forms of housing for different demographics and income levels. The community also wants to ensure that new development doesn't negatively impact adjacent neighborhoods and that new buildings have good design and are constructed with sustainable materials that contribute to placemaking. Of similar importance are recommendations that speak to affordable housing and the threat of gentrification. The community would like to see the plan recommend incentivizing more affordable housing and constructing more affordable housing that works for households of any age, size, and income. In a nod to some of the historic buildings on campus, the community has recognized the opportunity to also explore reusing some of the existing historic resources on campus for affordable housing. One such example being Pancratia Hall, a former dormitory, which will eventually house 60+ affordable housing units as announced earlier this year by the developer. The community has had an opportunity to weigh in on these recommendations, and as you can see, there's a great deal of support in the community. Results show us that 96% of survey takers either strongly agree or somewhat agree with the land use recommendations. 95% of survey takers strongly agree or somewhat agree with the historic preservation recommendations. And finally, 88% of survey takers strongly agree or somewhat agree with the economy and the affordable housing recommendations. Throughout the planning process, there were a number of topics that warranted future conversation and work with the community. These are topics that are of the utmost importance to the community. The first is the height of any future buildings in the plan area. The maximum allowable building heights map directs appropriate development intensity for the plan area. It's important to note that the Ruby Park Hill View Plan, which was enacted in 1969, guides the building heights that can be achieved on the campus. There is support for varying building heights up to 5 stories as well as 8 stories, but as redevelopment occurs on the campus, it will be important to maintain view sheds to and from the campus. Due to the topography of the site and the height restriction imposed by the Ruby Park Hill View Plane, not every portion of the 8-story maximum area indicated on the map in front of you allows for buildings to reach that level of intensity. In addition, the plan calls for design requirements to further restrict the number and placement of any buildings over 5 stories on the campus to a single location and a limited footprint to protect the view to the campus. It's equally important that there be a transition of higher intensity development in the center to lower intensity moving toward the surrounding residential. Where the view plane does not cover the campus, the plan further imposes height limitations that speak to these transitions. Finally, the plan contains a number of recommendations that speak to supporting and enhancing public transit in the area, especially along Federal Boulevard. The plan allows for more density and anticipates growth in these areas that are adjacent to transit. One of the defining characteristics of the Loretto Heights campus is the sweeping views of downtown Denver and the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. As such, the plan speaks to maintaining important view sheds. Historically, there was a grand view of the administration building, and the community finds this view shed to be one of the most important attributes to preserve. The plan calls for tools like zoning regulation, design standards and guidelines, and other regulatory tools to ensure that height and mass of larger new buildings are not only compatible with existing historic structures, but also protect and frame the key views as identified in the plan. Furthermore, the plan identifies key open space areas as identified by the community and specifically calls out an area in front of the administration building and calls for the inclusion of a publicly accessible open area or a promenade. As you know, historic preservation and the reuse of historic buildings is one of the central concepts within the plan area, and as such, there are a number of recommendations that speak to this particular topic. The campus history and the preservation or reuse of existing structures and features on the site was one of the top community concerns and desires. Community feedback provided direction on which campus structures and features should be prioritized for preservation and reuse. These include 8 historic resources: the Administration Building and Chapel, Pancratia Hall, the cemetery, Matchbuff Hall, the pool, the library, and the theater. The community gained consensus on using multiple tools to achieve its vision in both the short term and the long term, including historic designation, preservation easements, and historic covenants. These options allow for the best tools to be implemented for the preservation and reuse of historic resources, including local historic designation of the resources as individual structures and/or historic districts. The second section is mobility. There's a strong desire to improve streets by making them more connected, safer, and more comfortable. This includes making streets more functional for walkers with amenities like added crosswalks and medians, street trees, lighting, and landscaping, and also making intersections safer for bikers and walkers, especially along Federal Boulevard. In terms of the multimodal recommendations, bicycling has become a priority, and since there will be new streets in the plan area, this is a great opportunity to improve the bicycle connections and the infrastructure along these new streets. There is also a desire to prioritize additional connections to and from the Bear Creek Trail and the South Platte River Trail. The community is also interested in making it easier and more comfortable to take the bus and the light rail. This includes exploring the provision of more frequent service along West Dartmouth Avenue, east to the Inglewood Light Rail Station, as well as encouraging more shared last mile options and making transit more accessible for residents in the plan area. The community has had an opportunity to weigh in on these recommendations, and as you can see, there's a great deal of support. Results show us that 96% of survey takers either strongly agree or some would agree with the mobility recommendations. The street network in the plan area calls for a variety of streets which help to improve the north-south and the east-west connections in the area, and also acknowledge the strong voice of the community to not have Dartmouth Avenue punched through from Federal Boulevard to Irving. In addition to this plan language, the plan calls for the implementation of any necessary street improvements, operational enhancements, and traffic calming measures along South Irving Street, south of the campus, to help mitigate traffic impacts and to improve connectivity in the area. This plan also encourages a new street connection extending south from DSST, which is the school in the area, as a way to relieve traffic congestion along Dartmouth Avenue. The community has also specifically called out a number of streets that need traffic calming measures, and this includes South Irving Street, South Julian Street, Amherst Avenue, and Federal Boulevard. One update to the draft plan that you do not have in front of you is an oversight that we caught since we sent the packets out on Wednesday. Within the draft plan, there is language calling for a multi-use path connecting Dartmouth Avenue through the plan area. So although this language has remained consistent in the draft plan, it was not reflected on the pedestrian and bicycle maps, and this has now been updated on those maps to match the language that has already been in the plan. And I do want to stress that this is not a recommendation for any type of vehicular access point, but rather a recommendation to help achieve better non-vehicular connectivity in this area of the development. And for those of you looking at the map here, you can see in blue where I'm speaking to. The final section is quality of life infrastructure, which includes recommendations for addressing access to healthy food, parks and recreation, and open space, and how the built environment affects health. Within the community, there's a strong desire to make it easier for residents to get fresh, healthy, affordable food. Within the community, that includes support for local grocery stores as well as community gardens in the plan area. It's been extremely important for the community to ensure this plan includes a variety of public spaces distributed throughout the plan area. The community would like to see a variety of publicly accessible open areas that are a variety of sizes and provide many activities for people of all ages, abilities, and incomes. Finally, these areas should connect to existing parks like the existing Loretto Heights Park and other trails and recreational opportunities. The community has also recognized the important role green infrastructure plays in the sustainability of an area. There's a focus on new tree plantings along streets to improve walkability and comfort, and in addition to trees, the community has recommended creating a system of green infrastructure which will improve water quality, reduce stormwater runoff, as well as minimize the urban heat island effect. So similar to the recommendations found in land use and mobility, we've seen very strong support for these quality of life recommendations. 97% of survey respondents strongly agree or somewhat agree with these recommendations. Some of the key things to highlight in this quality of life section is first, the connection to the Loretto Heights Park, both in terms of infrastructure, so the addition of sidewalks, trails, bike paths, hawk signals, but also with open space and recreational opportunities like a multi-use trail from the park to the center of the campus along the existing irrigation ditch. Finally, encouraging wayfinding signage throughout the plan area to get people to and from the park. Second, the plan recognizes existing assets already in the area, including the South Platte River Trail and Bear Creek Trail. The plan calls for the provision of additional multi-use trails or sidewalk access extending through the campus to improve access to these regional trail systems. I mentioned green infrastructure earlier, and it's important to note that the plan area is located within the West Harvard Gulch and the Bear Creek stormwater basins, both of which have been identified as priority basins by the city, meaning there's a greater need for water quality improvements. The plan calls for green infrastructure, both natural and engineered, to help improve the condition of these basins and make the site a sustainable model for future redevelopment. Blueprint Denver identifies 3 implementation actions: regulations, investments, and partnerships. Regulatory and policy strategies change city codes or regulations to affect desired outcomes. Examples in the plan include historic designation, Denver zoning code text and map amendments, infrastructure improvements associated with development projects, and requirements regarding open space. Public investment strategies are those involving public funding or public infrastructure. Examples include street reconstruction, bike lane installation, new transit lines, and park improvements. Partnership strategies come in many forms. They require an investment from the city, property owners, private developers, or a combination thereof. Examples in the plan including partnering with Historic Denver to implement appropriate short-term and long-term protection mechanisms for the historic resources identified in the plan, and then also partnering with the cities of Sheridan and the city of Inglewood, as well as Arapahoe County, to study and implement transit, bike, and pedestrian improvements to West Dartmouth Avenue and crossing improvements at US 285 and Knox Court south of the site. So with that, I want to hand this off to Jenny as she's going to walk you through some of the planning board review criteria.
Good afternoon. As Jason mentioned, I'm going to take you through the review criteria for the evaluation of this area plan. The 3 criteria ask the planning board to consider if an inclusive community process was used to develop the plan is consistent with the vision, goals, and strategies of Comprehensive Plan 2040, and the plan demonstrates a long-term view. In terms of the inclusive community process, the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan is based on a year-long engagement process designed to be authentic, fair, and inclusive. It began in September 2018, and we're anticipating its completion this September, so next month. This inclusive community process was carried out in 3 phases: visualize, strategize, and realize. Each of the phases included multiple steering committee meetings, community meetings, and other public outreach to inform the plan's vision and recommendations. 17 steering committee members representing neighborhood and community organizations, nonprofits, businesses, and major property owners guided and informed the plan over 10 meetings that were also attended by over 150 community members. This work built upon what had been previously started by local leaders and neighborhood groups in anticipation of the redevelopment. 4 community meetings, including an all-Spanish community meeting, illustrated the strong community participation for this area plan, with an average attendance of 100 people per meeting and a total attendance of 450 participants across the meeting series. 2 online surveys were also made available for those unable to attend the community meetings or who preferred a different option for sharing their comments. The first survey mirrored content from the first and second community meetings, and the second survey provided an opportunity for the community to comment on the draft plan. Paper versions of the survey were also made available. Over 750 community members participated in the online surveys, providing 2,300 individual comments. CPD staff also attended additional community events like registered neighborhood organization meetings and a cabinet in the community meeting at College View Community Center. Promotion of the Loretto Heights area plan process and advertising of meetings, surveys, and draft plans was conducted by CPD communications staff and Councilman Flynn's office and produced very strong results. Over 25,000 flyers were distributed in Districts 2 and 7 to promote community meetings, which contributed to the robust attendance numbers. Via social media, we have nearly 5,000 Twitter followers and more than 400 email subscribers. This plan also experienced more media coverage than comparable plans put out by CPD. The Denver Post, CBS 4, 7 News, Fox 31, Denverite, and Educa Radio Denver, which was done in Spanish, all carried stories on the plan. Lastly, reflecting the demographic diversity of the area, Spanish translated materials were provided at every community meeting and online. Interpretation services and childcare were also provided at all public meetings. Based on this engagement and outreach, staff find that the Loretto Heights Area Plan was developed through an inclusive public process. In terms of plan consistency, the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan is consistent with several goals and strategies in each vision element within Comprehensive Plan 2040. The goals and strategies met for each vision element are indicated here on the screen, and the details of those are provided in the staff report. Because this area plan refines Blueprint Denver, we have also addressed its consistency with the land use plan policies and strategies. In general, this area plan contains content specifically addressing each of the minimum standards outlined in Blueprint Denver related to the opportunity to create area plans citywide via the Neighborhood Planning Initiative. In other words, area plans provide more specific guidance than Blueprint Denver, which is what this plan achieves. The plan is also consistent with several Blueprint Denver policies and strategies noted on the slide and detailed in the staff report. In summary, the Loretto Heights Area Plan is consistent with Comprehensive Plan 2040 and Blueprint Denver. For the long-term view, this area plan provides a comprehensive long-term vision for growth within the plan area over a period of 20 years. This vision, as reflected in the plan recommendations, respects existing historic character and development patterns while promoting sustainable growth within the plan area. Staff finds that the Loretto Heights Area Plan establishes goals, recommendations, and strategies that will guide change in the plan area for the next 20 years, thereby meeting the criteria for demonstrating a long-term view. Based on the finding that the applicable review criteria have been met, staff recommends approval of the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan with the condition that the document be edited for clarity and correctness. And this includes the correction to the multi-use path mobility map that Jason previously mentioned. We thank you for your time and are happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We have several speakers signed up, and if you're not yet signed up and care to be, please fill out a little yellow slip at the back. I'll call the first few speakers in the order that they'll come up. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please address the planning board as a whole and start with your name and, if you're comfortable, your address for the record. The first speaker will be Karen Calalili, and this is the part of the agenda where I mispronounce people's names. My apologies. Mark Wickowitz and Jim Gibson.
Hello, my name is Karen Calavity. I didn't know I was going to be first. And I have been critiqued in the sense that I now live in Westminster, but I have to preface that this site is of value to me. I was born in Denver in 1957, and I've spent many years of my life in Denver. So the idea that I've been given sometimes that because I don't reside within Denver, this property has, shouldn't mean anything to me is kind of ridiculous. It means a lot. I have a friend who attended this school many years ago. I've seen it as a landmark for years and years. And not only is its architecture beautiful and worthy of saving, but the site itself, because it's a green space, it's 72 acres of almost green space, which we don't have in Denver anymore. And it's a sad situation that we don't have all that green space in Denver anymore. Some of the key, I'm concerned about the density that's proposed. I'm also concerned when I see, originally before Westside Investments, bought the site, there had been other developers looking at it. And a group of concerned people, looked at the site, walked the site, and one of my favorite areas was the ravine area on the southwest portion, which holds wildlife. It holds water corridors. When we're talking about environmental resiliency, it's very important to take the natural world into consideration and not just engineer the heck out of these existing waterways, including the the waterways, the ditches that are not natural, but they've been there for 100 years or more now because they were part of the site and part of the water supply for the sisters when they constructed the site. And all of these support, mature trees, animals, people. There's owls. There's some wildlife there that you don't see typically in the city, and that's because there's 72 acres of green space in this location that you just don't see everywhere else. And I'm very concerned about, that's one of the main things of this point is that it's got a lot of green space. I'd like to see that retained.
Thank you very much. And I should have mentioned when the yellow light comes on, there'll be 30 seconds left, and when the red light comes on, the 3 minutes have expired. Next, Mr. Wickenwicks. Please let me know how that should have been pronounced.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Mark Witkevich, and I appreciate you inviting me up here to say a few words. I am a principal at Westside Investment Partners. We are the owner of the property, so I'm an owner of the property as well. And I guess what I want to just say more than anything is that when we started this process a year ago, it was a hard pill for us to swallow, to take control of the destiny of the project out of our hands and essentially put it into the community's hands. And when we started the process, I was really unclear on how this was going to end up. But I can tell you with 100% certainty that it was the best thing that we ever did for this project. And actually, I'm quite confident that the vision that we originally had for this project and the vision that we ended up with through the area plan led by the community and also led by CPD is far superior to what we were originally thinking. Not that it was significantly different, but just superior in the tune of what we learned about what really matters most to the community and how deep it runs, whether it's the open space or it's the historic preservations or the view corridors, and candidly, even the culture that's baked in within the community. And most importantly, we learned about something that was called the spirit of Loretto, which is kind of hard to explain in a 2-minute dissertation here, but I can tell you that it's very, very important. And what it really means is it means community and it means bringing people together. This campus has been closed for 130 years and is now proposed to be an open campus, with an opportunity for the community to come together. Of course, we have some opposition that we're still dealing with, and we have full intentions of continuing to work with them as we go beyond the area plan. I think the biggest problem with the area plan is just understanding that it is a visioning document. It is not a site plan. It is not a zoning document. It's a vision document. It's what's to guide us going forward. I know that you guys understand that, but I think it's been the hardest thing for the community to understand on a go-forward basis. And I'm glad to be in front of you. I'm glad to be working on this. This is going to be one of my legacies where I can bring my kids to and be very proud of. And I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Gibson.
Name is Jim Gibson. I'm representing the Loretto Heights Community Initiative, which is a collection of stakeholders concerned about the campus. In our view, this area plan is filled with specifics of what the developer wanted to be included, but has very little details about what the community needed to be included. There's no specifics on the number and type of structures on the site, no answers about the impacts of increased auto traffic, no solid details on how much open space in the site's beautiful topography will be left behind, very little information about what type and how much affordable housing will be built on the site, considerable uncertainties about whether the historic value and other character-defining features of the campus will still be with us when all is said and done. The response from CPT staff and the developer to those questions was always the same. It's too early to address those issues. Then 1 week after our last Area Plan Steering Committee meeting, which was on July 23rd, a Metropolitan District Plan proposal for the campus was presented by the developer to the City Council's Finance and Governance Committee. The document, clearly worked on during the area plan process, provides many of the answers to the questions the community had been asking. Unfortunately, those answers were never provided, and the community never had an opportunity to weigh in on those issues. Many other types of questions also went unanswered during the area plan process itself. For example, between the first and second drafts of the plan in front of you right now, the maximal allowable building heights in one section of the plan area were mysteriously increased from 3 to 5 stories. At our last area plan steering committee, I personally asked why that specific change was made. CPD's answer was, quote, the result of community input from the online surveys. Despite repeated attempts, to this day, CPD has not provided the data to back up that claim. In fact, the way CPD staff has used data from the online surveys would make one think the results were valid and scientific. They clearly are not. First, many of the questions were vague, leading, and often geared to result in specific outcomes. Second, for any survey to generate valid results, an adequate number of respondents must be selected randomly. The respondents in CPD's online surveys were self-selected, and the same individuals could repeatedly complete the same survey. Unfortunately, the results from the survey that you just saw earlier in the presentation are meaningless. Frankly, I'm shocked that anyone would include this data as evidence to endorse the plan. A frequent refrain of CPD and the developers that the area plan was community-driven. It simply was not. To put it simply, flawed processes result into flawed products. I humbly ask the Planning Board to not endorse this area plan.
Thank you very much. Our next 3 speakers will be Larry Ambrose, Claire Harris, thank you, and Mary Nell Gage. Mr. Ambrose.
Thank you, Chairman Noble. I remember very well back in 2014 when the Planning Board approved the St. Anthony's plan, and I spoke to you afterwards, and your advice to me was make sure that the area plan is very specific because it shouldn't be vulnerable to interpretation. I took that advice to heart, Joel, and that's what we've been trying to do on this area plan and trying to get specifics, but it has not been easy. The Loretto Heights Community Initiative is a group of various organizations throughout Southwest Denver that formed back in 2017. We've had as many as 30 different members of this group who have met regularly to discuss, and we did come out with a paper initially that laid out guidelines for what we wanted. So the details of what we believe is not in this plan have to do with the following. Historic district designation is cited as ideal, but only as a recommendation in the consultant's report. District's designation should be used to protect not only significant historic structures on the site, but also the integrity of the existing landscapes and outdoor spaces. There's a lack of assurances in the area plan for preserving the quality and character of the outdoor spaces. The quad, the core, the Grand Lawn, seen from Federal Boulevard, in front of the Academy building, the theater, the plaza with galleries, the library, irrigation dishes, and the ponds on the northwest side. Timing and implementation of any of the preservation tools mentioned is not specific. Implementing any of the tools cited is meaningless if done after the development has been completed. Historic district designation should be done concurrently with public site planning process to be followed by zoning. Building heights were directly addressed as part of the planning process. However, objections raised were obfuscated with vague promises of view planes, overlays, and open spaces. Building heights of up to 5 stories on Federal Boulevard are inappropriate. Building heights of up to 8 stories on the southwest side of the campus are inappropriate. Views to and from the campus are left vulnerable by the area plan. They are shown only as arrows. Views of the campus from the east are vulnerable to being blocked by 5-story structures in front of the Academy building. The view corridor along the narrow promenade envisioned in the Metro District Plan was not revealed, nor was it discussed, despite many calls for addressing this issue as part of the area plan. The view corridor from the west side of the campus to the mountains was not revealed or discussed, despite numerous requests to do so. I'm presenting this paper on behalf of Tony Hernandez, who was the representative to the steering committee. I am the alternate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Claire Harris.
Good afternoon. I want to start with my relationship to Loretto Heights. I'm a graduate in 1978 nursing. I've lived within a few blocks for 50 years. I've attended plays, used the pool, used the tennis courts, gone to concerts. I live now about 4 blocks away on Dartmouth, one of the streets they've mentioned. And when Loretto Heights became Takeo Loretto Heights, I hosted Japanese students for about 6 years. So I've been connected for many, many ways over a long time. First of all, I want to say that I think the committee meetings, which I attended every single one, including little ones, group meetings, whatever, except for the Spanish-speaking one. I don't speak Spanish. But I felt those meetings were open, allowed tons of community input. I think LHCI, which has just spoken, which says they represent several neighborhoods, don't represent College View, don't represent the city of Sheridan. Quite a few neighborhoods that have sent letters of support are not represented by them. I have been on the board of College View's Neighborhood Association for 25 years, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, et cetera. We are the entire neighborhood to the east, the whole east side of Loretto Heights. So first of all, I think the community meetings were very useful. I think Councilman Flynn, Jason, and the city employees, as well as the representatives from West Side, were open to all discussions. I think we covered most of those areas. Yes, there was disagreement, but we got to give our input. I have talked with people from College View, Sheridan, Dartmouth Heights, Harvey Park, Brentwood, and Marlee. Except for Harvey Park, the rest of us, I believe, have sent letters of support. We have, on College View, had a unanimous vote in favor of the small area plan. I want to be clear about that, and you have a letter. We believe for College View, which is a poorer neighborhood, that this will be an asset to us. The campus, which was closed, will now be open to our neighborhood. We don't have a lot of green space. We're, again, a poorer neighborhood. Some of the improvements that will be done along Federal will be really good for us because the east side of Federal has some decrepit old apartment buildings and stuff. We think it will be an inspiration for change. We're really hopeful for the improvements to follow. And we love that it retains the historical piece, the main campus, and hopefully a promenade straight across to there. And I want to mention my particular interest is the history is there, but I'm 72, I'm going to be dead. I'm looking at the future, so I'm hoping this development will be also looking towards the future with all kinds of future designs, infrastructure, electric car parking. I mean, all kinds of things that I've seen on some of their projects. I believe that's what this will do for us. Thank you.
Nell Gage.
My name is Mary Nell Gage. My roots in this campus are deep, both as a sister of Loretto for the last 50 years and as an alumna who graduated from Loretto Heights. It has been an honor for me to serve the Sisters of Loretto as a representative on the steering committee, meeting with so many dedicated neighbors, civic agency representatives, historical preservationists, city officials, alumni. During the last 2.5 years of meetings about our hopes and dreams for the redevelopment at Loretto Heights. It has been a privilege during the last year to walk with Westside as they learned about our legacy, Loretto in the Rockies. It is important for you to know that Loretto remains in conversation with Westside over the future maintenance, renovation, and perpetual care of the cemetery that is on the Loretto Heights grounds. You have heard this afternoon that some new information regarding ample space, height and density of buildings, historical preservation, beautiful designs and graphs have become available, but after the end of our steering committee meetings. But I want to tell you that some of those issues regarding ample space, historical preservation, maintenance of majestic mountain views, and the iconic Administration Academy building are so important to so many. So we ask that you, as the planning board, continue to watch with us to ensure that those issues are acted upon as the development takes place. Thank you.
Very much. Our next three speakers will be Norma Brown, Jim Hartman, and Sochi Gaitan. Norma Brown.
I'm Norma Brown. I am an alumni of Loretto Heights, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm a graduate of 59, so that's a few years older than anybody else in here, I think. And that Administration Academy building is not very far from my home and has been a wonderful memory and inspiration to me throughout all of these years. I am so pleased that the administration building and the chapel and Pancratia Hall have been protected and will not be torn down. We are in hopes that many of the other buildings will still be there in the years to come too, because they have a lot of meaning to the community that has been in meetings now since last September. I started with this group back 2017, I think, and have attended meetings when Westside took over too. So it has been a real joy to be able to speak up and say, this is what the alumni would like to see kept. It has beautiful green areas. It has historical buildings. It is a real joy to drive down Federal and see this. And I hope that you someday can do that too and enjoy it. The community has been very responsive in working with each other as to what needs to be kept, what needs to be bettered. I am looking forward to a community of enjoyment in my remaining years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim Hartman.
Good afternoon, Planning Board. My name is Jim Hartman. I'm one of the owners of Hartman Ely Investments. My partner, Susan Ely, is here with me in the back. We specialize in preservation of historic buildings and affordable housing. I represent the team that is going to redevelop and preserve Pancratia Hall for affordable housing. We're so excited to be part of this team and part of this community planning effort. We've been involved for the past year, attending the community meetings and observing and participating in the process. We think it's been an excellent process, and this area plan is an excellent product of that process. We have been involved for the last couple of years. Originally, one of the council members of the city of Sheridan asked us to come to a community meeting as a result of our Fruitdale School Lofts project in Wheat Ridge, which was also affordable housing in a historic building. So we attended and we got very excited about what we foresaw as the opportunities at Loretto Heights. For the past 25 years, we've been working at the Lowry community, the town center area there, with various historic preservation and affordable housing projects. We firmly believe that historic preservation and affordable housing and community engagement can create really wonderful, sustainable, and vibrant communities. We encourage you to approve this plan. We wholeheartedly support it, and we are very happy to be a part of it with Pancratia Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Sochi Gaetan.
Hi, good afternoon. Xochitl Gaitan. I'm the president of the Harvey Park Community Organization. And it's important that I share a little bit about myself. I identify as a Latina, indigenous, Spanish-speaking woman that arrived to this country when I was only 3 years old. I own a home in Harvey Park for about 17 years now. I raised my 22-year-old there and have an 11-year-old that I'm raising in the neighborhood. I have a board of about 13 board members, a very diverse board. About half of them live on the eastern edge of Harvey Park neighborhood, which meets Loretto Heights campus. And I would say that about that number are very, very concerned about the language around Dartmouth, the avenue, because there was talks about that street going through. And they also have friends and neighbors. I also have friends and neighbors. I see two of them here today that live in Dartmouth Heights. And we all have those same concerns as Dartmouth Heights has of Dartmouth Avenue going through. I say that because I have here with me, and I've brought several copies if you want to see them or read this. I have here with us our position, the board's position of how we voted on this last area plan. And we have 5 concerns. And it's not a full 100% support of the area plan. As a matter of fact, it's a conditional support, meaning we have 5 very strong concerns that we are hoping that will be addressed adequately. And we are in conversations with Jason regarding that. I am aware of that, Jason. We expect for these 5 concerns to be addressed adequately. So one of them is Dartmouth Avenue. We expect to have stronger wording, stronger language around Dartmouth Avenue going through, or rather not going through. Sabin Elementary School, to that point, is only less than 5 blocks away where my son goes to school. And we have tons of traffic and congestion due to that fact alone. It going through will cause a lot of traffic congestion. It will probably cause a lot of folks to be immobile. And I really, really ask you to take a look at that. One of the top concerns that we had that our board had a really lengthy conversation around was making this site a Denver Landmark Historic District designation. For most of my board, Loretto Heights campus is very near and dear to their heart. They have a special connection to it, and it's important to them that that happens. The third point was that, again, traffic congestion. We're really needing strong language around mitigating traffic congestion. And we're also looking at not only Dartmouth, but we're looking at the intersections of Lowell and Hampton. We have the Loretto Heights apartment buildings, several buildings. They are literally adjacent to the southwest part of the campus of Loretto Heights. And we have a lot of traffic already and a lot of issues with traffic in that intersection. And it's important to us that we have Again, stronger language around mitigating traffic congestion because we're highly, highly concerned about pedestrian and bike connectivity. One more point is the building heights that we're wanting to include 5 stories as the highest possible height because the higher you go, the higher the penthouse goes, and the higher the price, the more you push us, Black, brown, and indigenous people out.
Okay.
And there's very few of us Latinos left, as you've read the reports, one of the few left in Southwest Denver. So the higher the building, the higher the penthouse price.
Please stay here for question time at the end of the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next speakers we have are Mark Upshaw, Adriana Pena, and John Olson. Mark Upshaw, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Board. Very happy to be here. My name is Mark Upshaw, and I live at 3492 West Dartmouth Avenue. I live in the Dartmouth Heights Neighborhood Association. It's an HOA of 72 homes. We are immediately to the west of Loretto Heights. I've lived there for 17 years, and prior to that, I lived in the College View neighborhood for approximately 20 years and co-founded the neighborhood association back in the mid-'80s. I'm familiar with Southwest Denver, and I love Loretto Heights campus. On our last stakeholder meeting, which was July the 23rd, I signed a letter that our president of Dartmouth Heights wrote in strong support of this plan. I come to you today, it's still in support, but with some grave concerns, which you've heard before, and that is the traffic impact. Near the end of this process, and I want to say that I'm not a stakeholder, but I've been active and attended most of the stakeholder meetings and many of the community meetings, and I'm in communication with our stakeholder group. So we asked the question, because we always want more detail in a vision plan because of the impact of traffic. We asked the question about what is the likely projected housing density in terms of units per acre or people per the plan. And we were told, several of us that asked those questions, that this is a little bit too much detail for this point in the plan. Our hope was that we could also know a little more about where that housing density would occur on campus, because it would affect where these new connector streets hit Irving and Julian, which is our boundary, our western boundary, and would impact Dartmouth Heights, the Dartmouth Avenue. Anyway, we were hoping that we might get some metric about vehicle trips per day that could have been generated by professional traffic engineers and planners. We just haven't seen that. We thought that might help in the collaboration process and help us make some better decisions or inform the plan in a little more detailed way. I do want to say in closing that the plan has been very inclusive, and Mark Wakevich has been supreme in his patience and listening to us. And I'd also like to share the concern that we all, including the planning board, the council office, the neighborhood groups, and the city staff, stay involved at every step of this process. Because my understanding, of course, the area plan is not a zoning change, it's a guide. And the Metro District Plan, which has a great deal more detail and does discuss density, is neither a zone plan either. So I'm just encouraging continued involvement and scrutiny so we get the best possible result.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Adriana Pena.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adriana Pena, and I am a Denver Public Schools member of the Loretto Heights Steering Committee. As a reference, DPS owns the land where DSST, College View, Middle School, and High School are currently located. I would like to express my gratitude to Councilman Kevin Flynn, West Side Investment Partners, and the City Planning Service Department for leading the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan process. This work includes multiple community meetings, surveys, and other information, such as draft of this plan, blueprints, and guidance in progress. All were provided in English and Spanish to our community. Our community had several opportunities to provide our input on the plan. In the planning process at different levels of our community, we engaged our DPS parents, students, and overall Southwest Denver community to make sure all their voices were heard. We provide feedback and concerns, and they were included in the draft plan. Our top priority is our students. For this reason, the mobility proposal was crucial for this project. A study for a new street connection. This project is a way to relieve the DSST traffic congestion along the Dartmouth Avenue. So with this proposal, we minimize the exposure of our children and families to heavy volumes of traffic on the school route. This is important for the safety and security of our students. We want to create a safe and inclusive environment for all Denver students, current and future generations. With substantial additional residential units appears to be proposed, the school capacity considerations were taken into account. We are hopeful that everyone is as happy with the final development as we are. The draft plan talks about early childhood education in a number of places. This is encouraging and consistent with the work we have done recently. That shows demands for early childhood education in nearby neighborhoods. It is important to remember that the schools in this area are strong school performance frameworks, and particularly the elementary school levels. With significant new residential development proposed, school will seem to be a quality of life element that should be considered. Denver Public Schools is committed to meeting the educational needs of every student, and we look forward to working together to provide support, resources to our students, and ensuring that this neighborhood reflects the vision of our Southwest community. To that end, we urge partners at the City and Development Corporation to continue engage our Spanish-dominant community with deep levels of engagement through the implementation of the plan going forward. We are so grateful to have been able to help and support said stakeholders, and you can count on us going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. John Olson.
Thank you very much. My name is John Olson. I'm the Deputy Director for Historic Denver. We're at 1420 Ogden Street. Participating in the steering committee for the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan was of the highest priority for our organization and our board, given the historic and architectural heritage of the campus. We believe that this plan and the future redevelopment is a unique opportunity to build on the site's legacy as the cornerstone of the Southwest Denver community. Throughout the planning process, during both community-wide meetings and steering committee meetings, as well as what you've heard today, participants and stakeholders emphasized and prioritized the preservation of the unique assets and qualities of the campus. We appreciate that the plan has responded with the inclusion of many positive elements related to the historic preservation, which recognize the campus's iconic nature at the core of the vision. We are also pleased to see preservation strategies and sensitivity to historic resources reflected in several parts of the plan, as preservation cannot be an action taken in isolation from other key decisions. While the included recommendations for individual designations and the exploration of tools such as historic districts for the campus are very, very important, I want to emphasize statements that we've made throughout the process asking for greater certainty regarding the future of the site's most significant assets, principally the administration building and chapel, cemetery, and Pancratia Hall, including addressing how they will be protected in the short and the long term. We are currently working with the master developer, Westside Investment Partners, to solidify those immediate protections so that the goals of the small area plan, as expressed by the community, can later be best achieved. We thank Mark Wikevich of Westside for his willingness to engage in those conversations, and we thank the City of Denver's Community Planning and Development Department for their hard work on the plan. We also thank the members of the steering committee, Councilman Flynn from Council District 2, and the many community members who have contributed to this process. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next three speakers will be Chris Shears, Irene Aguilar, and Mike Highland. Chris Shears.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Shears with Shears Atkins Rockmore, and our address is 1550 Wynkoop. We're the planning and architectural consultants for Westside Investments, and will be involved on an ongoing basis for planning and design as the project moves ahead. Over the past year, we've been working with Westside and have attended all the steering committee meetings, all the neighborhood meetings, community meetings, and we've attended and just listened. We haven't really participated because it was important that we hear firsthand what the community was saying. We've also learned everything there is to know about the property. As you can imagine, it's a complicated and large property, including the ravine that was mentioned earlier, the natural ravine. We recognize the importance of that. Everything that we've discussed internally with our client and the consultant team that he's put together, and the ideas that we have to date developed for this property are consistent with the plan document and what we have heard from the community. I've been impressed with community planning and development staff and Jason's leadership throughout this process. I think everybody involved would say the same thing. Well done. I've also been impressed with those who have been involved with the steering committee and those who have attended the meetings. The discussions have been interesting, important, and especially important for those of us who are going to be working on this project for a number of years. I believe one participant said it all when she stated that this planning process has brought the immediate community together and created new friendships. I think that happens often if a outreach process like this is run effectively. And I imagine that that's the residual value of these kinds of efforts. It's also the value behind the plan document. This document and the resulting zoning, infrastructure, and development that spring from it will result in a place that brings neighborhoods together. Thank you, and I encourage you to support this plan amendment, or this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene Aguilar.
Good afternoon, Planning Board. My name is Irene Aguilar. I live at 3071 South Irving Street, and if you look at a map of the Loretto Heights campus, you will see my backyard because I am right across the street from it. So obviously this has been a process that has been of great interest to me. I will say that I missed the open land across the place where I could illegally throw balls for my dog. But in thinking about what will happen with this land, I've been very pleased with the planning process that has undergone. I think there have been a good variety of voices at the table. My homeowners association, Dartmouth Heights Homeowners Association, has been there and has advocated strongly for our community. I feel as if most of their concerns have been addressed. Obviously, without knowing what the density of population will be in the development, the traffic potential impacts are unknown, but I can tell you that Irving Street, in the state that it's in, is already a dangerous street because people drive way too fast down it. So I'm looking forward to them doing traffic mitigation efforts along Irving Street, which will hopefully help with some of the concerns. I actually work now for the city as the Neighborhood Equity and Stabilization Program Director, and I asked my Councilman Flynn, and he said I was still allowed to testify. The reason I bring that forward is that we have a shortage of housing in the city of county of Denver, and the plans in this neighborhood plan indicate that they'd like to look at putting perhaps duplexes and townhomes along the Irving side, which I see as potentially a way in which to provide some middle-income housing for our teachers and other fire workers, policemen moving forward because of the bargain basement price they got this lovely land at. So I'm hopeful that Mark will be working with me further in the future to look at how we can help build wealth in our community going forward. And I am excited that we will have some nice places on South Federal for people to live. We have a lot of rundown old buildings, and I think this will bring a nice new area. As my husband and I attended a concert at Levitt Pavilion a couple of weeks ago, we saw a lot of people who we guessed might have been from the Highlands Ranch area. I won't tell you how we profiled them, but I thought, you know, these are the people who perhaps will help keep the theater, make the theater sustainable, which I know is something a lot of us in the community would like, but it comes at a high price, and we need business for that. And the opportunity to have potentially restaurants and other businesses we could walk to from our community is I'm looking forward to. So as a across the street neighbor, other than worrying what happens with the coyotes, I'm very supportive of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Highland.
I'm a little too tall for this, I think. I'll speak loudly. My name is Mike Highland. I live at 3582 West Dartmouth in Dartmouth Heights neighborhood, just a couple doors down from Mark Upshaw. I'm here sort of personally just to once again, Mark will laugh, I can see him smiling right now, to say that we're very much against any incursion of Dartmouth going all the way through. I think when we think of new developments, a lot of times sort of repurposing, you know, density fluctuates a little bit, but in this case, density is going to radically change, which I understand is a big need in Denver, and I totally understand what Irene just said, and I'm in favor of us being able to create housing for people. But for me personally and for Mark, given the numbers that we didn't have during the small area plan, that 2,500 possible new residents plus 1,000 commercial visitors. Just doing the quick math, and I'm certainly not a traffic expert, and it's something that I was hoping we could maybe get into the small area plan, is talking about how many trips per day that's going to mean in front of our house. Because right now, and I don't know where you guys live, but imagine anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 new car trips per day in front of your house, because that's what we're looking at. And I have a 2-year-old daughter and a son on the way, that it's a huge safety concern for us. So my biggest reason for being here is personally just hoping that we can do something about the traffic abatement, and I've talked to Kevin about this, or Councilman Flynn, excuse me, about the process for budgeting for the traffic calming measures. And what I'm pleading for or hoping for is that we can have some sort of ongoing process where the traffic abatement does not lag years behind the development, because I feel like that's probably what will end up happening. And that is the most concerning thing to me. I'm actually okay. I can also see Mark smiling now. I'm in favor of the small area plan. I think that they did a good job, and there's a lot about it that our neighborhood is for. But the traffic calming measures is very scary for us because it is very uncertain, and it is very dependent on the city, and in large part you guys, voting for us to be getting those stop signs, not bumps, but you know, any sort of traffic calming measures that we can get. The other reason that I'm here, and I will do this very quickly, is to read a letter from our HOA president, who's not able to be here. He's actually got a newborn, and he's up to his neck. So this was a letter that he was trying to get submitted, and he didn't. Apparently, it didn't have it on time. His name is John Moore. And so I just wanted to read that, and hopefully I can do it quickly. Dartmouth Heights supports approval of the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan. There are many aspects of the plan that are exciting to our neighborhood, and we are supportive of Westside's efforts to activate the campus. We appreciate Westside's commitment to preserving the administration building and creating new green open space. However, the redevelopment also poses real challenges and threats to our neighborhood as well. In particular, Dartmouth Heights has been a quiet residential community with only local traffic for approximately 35 years, and we will continue to insist that that not change within reason. We have voiced these goals throughout the small area plan process and have come to compromise solutions with representatives from the city and Westside. The details of these compromise solutions matter and are integral to our support of the small area plan, which is why we are documenting them below. It is only logical and fair that those compromise solutions remain intact all the way through the implementation phase of this project. So there's 4 points. One.
I'm sorry, your time has been exceeded.
Can I just read it real quick? Because he didn't get this. He wasn't able to get this into the record.
Well, if you're able to mail it in, it will go with the record that's transmitted from here to City Council.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Thank you
absolutely.
very much.
Thank you so much. The last speaker I have a yellow slip for is Father Joseph Dang. And if you would like to speak on this and have not yet filled in a yellow slip, please do so. Father Day.
I'm short, so. I'm here on behalf of the Vietnamese American community of Colorado. It was an honor and a privilege for me to represent the Vietnamese American community, to be a part of the Loretto Heights Steering Committee. I actually came to Denver in 2011, being invited to become a chaplain for the Teiko, or known as the Japanese College, and so I had good memories there for 2 years. The chapel where I say mass and do weddings, and of course help the student around the campus. And it is sad to see it sold out. But then after that, it was an honor to get to meet the new developer, the investment with the West Side, and of course get to work with Jason, get to work with the Councilman Kevin Flynn. We are super impressed. And the Vietnamese community, especially the elders, they asked me a question. It's like, can you imagine if it is in Vietnam and you have millions of dollars and you buy a property? You do whatever you want. But why here that you have to get like the city planning and all that? It's such a headache. But it's an honor system that we have a democracy, so we all speak out about the concerns and all that. And we are super impressed because the plan, all the communities across the board been heard. And one of the things is the relationship between, the West Side proof to the community is that they actually going to do this for the community. Mark invited me to look into make this as a multicultural center. And right away, I'm really impressed because that he could make money, he could think about doing other things, but he said, let's do this for the community. So I do believe and I trust that you all should support this because from day one to now that we are very impressed how the system, how the planning and all of that. So thank you very much, and I urge that you will move to approve the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see we have Councilman Kevin Flynn here, and he's asked to speak at the end of the public comment. Oh, do we have another speaker? Is it pertaining to Loretto Heights? Okay, so we have a public comment period open, a public hearing for the Loretto Heights topic.
How many times do you change your actual name?
I think you may be confused about what this group is. So, yes, if you're interested in staying till after the meeting, I'd be happy to chat with you. But right now, we need to stay on the topic of Loretto Heights. Okay, Councilman Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a little odd to have this role reversal because here I'm speaking to you. Usually it's you folks speaking to us. About almost 3 years ago now, when Colorado Heights University said it was going to close and sell the campus, this created just a tremendous sense of urgency in Southwest Denver, as you've seen. This is not only the most iconic site in Southwest Denver, it's a very sacred site. It's a very revered site and an honored site. And it carries with it a tremendous legacy for Southwest Denver. So I immediately formed a stakeholder group. Many of the original members are actually here in the room today, who have been meeting with me, and then when the area plan came along, transitioned on to the steering committee, which we then expanded. But we would be kidding ourselves if we think that this is the community. This is part of the community. It was very important from day one that whatever happens here has input from the broader community, so we made every effort through the stakeholders here reaching out to their groups, and primarily through my office also with our outreach and the leafleting. The community is more than the folks who took their afternoon off to come down here. It is, for example, the 230 people who came out on a snowy Thursday night in January to come to the first community meeting. We leafleted 13,000 households, not only in Denver, but in the city of Sheridan, because Sheridan is a stakeholder here also, and their city council has passed a resolution of support for this. So I'm here to tell you that this area plan, 100% of what's in this area plan originated from the community. It reflects the community's vision overall. There are some folks who wanted more, there are some who wanted less, but you draw the thread through the community's desires, and I think this has done a tremendous job in doing that. However, I want to raise and emphasize one very important aspect that has been talked about tangentially, but I want to really hammer it. And so I want to echo what Xochitl Gaitan also said and several other speakers. Loretto Heights is such a different place in Denver. It's not a quarter section of vacant land or old farmland or the old Gates factory. It's not that. It's much more than that. As I said, it's sacred. There are 62 deceased sisters of Loretto who have this as their final resting place. So this is very special to us. This is a campus, and the goal, which hasn't really been said, but I want to articulate it clearly here, the goal is that this area plan implement a redevelopment that in 20 years and in 50 years, when you come back here, you will always know that this was a campus. This cannot be done, this cannot be achieved unless there's a strong statement from the planning board, as in the area plan, that we are not opening this up as a byway. This is a campus, this is a destination. People will come into it from the surrounding area. They will enjoy, hopefully, the Performing Arts Center that we hope to resurrect. People who live there will go out to their activities, to their work, to their play. But it is not a place that we want people to drive through and say, oh, look at that, as they go somewhere else. This is not someplace on the byway. This needs to be respected. And that's why the streets network that we talked about, and it's laid out in the plan, provides a serpentine and a casual drive through the campus, not connecting Dartmouth, because as Adriana Pena might testify, where the DSST school is, where Dartmouth Avenue kind of snakes down through the Catholic Charities apartments and the school, that cannot be a major thoroughfare. And we need to recognize that. We need the city agencies that are going to implement this plan to clearly understand that we are not opening up this campus for people to drive through it. We're opening up for people to come to it. And I hope that you see somewhere in your recommendations to us at City Council that flows through to Public Works, to safety, and to the other divisions of the city, that this is the vision, and you need to respect it. We need to use new street design standards. We need to update them, and Public Works is working on them now. We need to implement our Vision Zero principles and understand that this is a place where pedestrians will feel safe, where there's shared streets, and not, again, people passing through as an alternative to the Hamden Freeway or to Yale Avenue. So if there's one thing I want to emphasize, I hope that the board sees it proper to pass that guidance on to the agencies that will implement this and be more forward-thinking. Think Vision Zero, think traffic calming, and make sure that the street network that we've outlined in this plan is respected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other speakers who've not yet had a chance? Okay, we'll move to questions from the board to staff, to any of our speakers, or to the councilman. I think I'll start if no one else will. Let's just pick up where the councilman left off on the topic of Dartmouth Avenue. I've been searching through the plan. I'm not seeing a recommendation that Dartmouth Avenue go through for general traffic purposes. Perhaps that was discussed earlier. Jason or someone else from staff, could you tell us about this discussion and what the plan recommendations are and are not?
Thank you, Joel. So as has been elaborated from the community, one of the first things I think we heard was this sentiment that folks do not want Dartmouth Avenue to punch through from Federal Boulevard to South Irving Street. And so that's something that we've taken to heart since the beginning of this process. And so within the plan, there is a recommendation that Dartmouth Heights not go through from Federal Boulevard to South Irving Street. So originally we had drafted language some time ago, and we've been working with the steering committee to actually get stronger language in the plan to prevent this from happening and to recommend that this does not happen in the future. In addition to that, strengthening the language and having this language in the plan, we've gone further and we've worked with the steering committee to look at opportunities to actually improve the traffic and circulation in the area. So that includes a recommendation for a new street near the school there in the south of the site to help kind of move traffic from that area and alleviate any type of congestion or anyone from thinking that they want to go west along Dartmouth Avenue. And then in addition to that, there's South Irving Street that's south of the site that does just that and calls for operational enhancements and improvement to that street to allow for better connectivity in that particular area. So essentially what this boils down to is we feel as a staff that what we have settled on shows in the area plan and does not encourage a Dartmouth Avenue punch through.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, Jason's up there. Can I ask if you'd put the slide up with the criteria that the board needs to consider? Just it'll help focus our thinking. Thank you.
Okay, Don, you had a question.
Yeah, it's a question for the applicant or the owner of the property. I'm intrigued. These are the criteria we have to decide this on include consistency with Denver's plans. I'm intrigued at what information on density or units was provided in the Metro District plan that was not provided in the neighborhood planning context, just because it has to do with this balance between open space and housing that we're going to have to struggle with. So a Metro District plan is very different than a small area plan, and yet if information was provided about densities or units, it is relevant to whether this is how consistent it is with Denver's different goals. So I would like to ask what that information was.
Sure. Mark Wachkiewicz, Westside and Investment Partners. I'm a partner there. The City of Denver has a template service plan that they ask us to more or less abide by the template. Inside of that template, there are questions that are asked. Some are easy to answer, some of them are more difficult to answer. Not answering is not an option. So what we did is, and it doesn't ask for density as far as units, okay? It asks for density as it relates to residents, okay? So there's a big difference, as you know, between residents and units. The answer that we put down, using the best information that we had going off of the area plan, which has single family on the western and northern side, and then a historic core, and then a front mixed-use development. We tried to take our best guess as far as a unit count per acre, with numbers that I've talked with in general terms to the rest of some of the residents who have asked. When you boil it all down, it came up to, we guessed, at about 2,500 residents, okay? Now, does that mean that there's 3 residents per unit? Does that mean that there's 3.5? Does that mean that there's 4? You know, it's a very difficult question to answer. Mm-hmm. So if you take that 2,500 and divide it by one of those, it's a guess as what we might have in a unit count.
Thank you very much.
I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you, while you're here, sir, this, as Don said, we're not reviewing the Metro District, but for a lot of people watching, what is a Metro District? It has to do with raising money to maintain the area. Could you tell us about what that tool is? Because it came up, and it's probably important to have that context.
Yeah, it did come up, and I appreciate you asking the question and allowing me the liberty to expand upon that. As you know, Loretto Heights has been a college campus for 130 years. As such, it doesn't have any infrastructure means within it. In order to develop that property, it is going to be a very heavy lift from a public infrastructure standpoint. There are many tools that we have as developers in order to put in public infrastructure. It could be privately financed or it could be publicly financed. And the word public financing is a tricky term because when you use the word public financing, people immediately say, well, the city's paying for it. That's not the case, and that's not what a metro district is. A metro district is a state statute that allows a quasi-governmental agency to be formed on a specific area. The area can be small and the area can be very large. Our particular district that we're proposing to set up as a metropolitan district only covers our property, the 72 acres. What happens with a metro district is that it's a financing tool. What we do is we put, it's a way for the developer, as they say, to pay its own way. So what ends up happening is that we are able to, with the residents and the commercial districts that are formed there, charge ourselves an additional mill or two, or whatever the case may be, in order to create a revenue stream. We're able to take that revenue stream and pledge it forward and sell bonds and then have a net present value on it. And with those bonds, then we're able to use that money under very strict guidelines as what it can be used for. It doesn't go towards private development. It can only be used towards public improvements, roads, parks, infrastructure. In some cases, it can even be used for some of the renovations, but that's tricky because it has to be used for a public purpose on the renovation. Did I answer your question, sir?
Thank you very much. I just thought for anyone watching, for people in the audience who've heard about this, they could have been thinking that this is another planning tool where all is being revealed in terms of what the buildings are going to look like, et cetera. It is not that.
Can I add one more thing to that? Because we also have a sequencing problem here, okay? And the sequencing problem is, would it have been nice in a perfect world to have the area plan approved first, all the way through City Council, and then be talking about the Metropolitan District? The answer to the question is yes, okay? But, unfortunately, the way that the state statute is set up, you only have limited times when you can establish these districts. It's not just a city approval that you need, it's also election, and only the elections are done in November or in May. And May is every other year, as you know. When we decided to do this area planning process, we put the whole process on hold for 1 year. You know, if, hypothetically, we wouldn't have done the area planning process and had done just a straight rezoning, which we could have, or further yet, just to develop the property under its current zoning, we could have been already, you know, doing things in the proper order. I don't think it's in anybody's best interest, you know, that we wait until a year from now in order to get the Metro District, because without the Metro District, we can't get the public improvements completed.
Thank you for that important context.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I've written a few notes. I'll ask a few questions that were brought up by the public. Maybe most strikingly, the historic preservation. There's a lot in this plan about historic preservation. There's very specific recommendations calling out buildings to be preserved, the cemetery to be preserved. But I heard questions from the public about how this will be assured. And so we've got, you know, an area plan is not regulatory, it's vision, and it sets out the priorities of the community. Next steps after an area plan can be tools like rezoning, and also can be historic districts. This plan is coming to us. It started before the large development review process was in place, but it recommends using the large development review, and really in spirit it's following it. Step one being, do we have enough plan guidance? The answer is no. Let's go get plan guidance. That's what you've been doing. That's what we're culminating with today for that phase. Will perhaps a large development review process recommend a specific sequence of steps that gives the community assurance that the historic preservation goals will be met soon and prior to significant visible change on the site?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So as you alluded to, this is a unique situation where this plan is essentially in the LDR process. But you're absolutely right that once we start kind of the pre-app meeting, and once we start getting all of the city agencies at the table, there will be a very heavy and robust historic preservation discussion. And so as part of that, we will be looking at short-term and long-term goals, most of which is addressed in the plan, but we will be talking about that with Historic Denver and then also with DIDO, with affordable housing and things like that. So it is part of the process, and at that time we are going to be confirming all the regulatory steps that are needed. And with that, essentially you do have the pre-application and you have a draft that comes out, and you also have a community meeting. And so at that point, that's another opportunity to engage the community, and it will be very short-term. And we're really looking at this implementation as just kind of a larger package where we have everything in line that we really need to address, including historic preservation, design standards and guidelines, development agreement, and the rezoning package as well.
If I can repeat that back to you just to be sure I understand it clearly. Although the LDR tool didn't exist when this small area plan began, following this, you will start the LDR process that will have required public meetings, and the outcome of that will be a sequence that everybody will know, the public will know, these tools, these steps will be pursued in this order, including historic preservation.
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Jason, if you can stay there, one of the things that I wanted to add on was the concerns that we heard about open space. So can you touch on if open space will be included in that review of the LDR review, and just reiterate some of the parts of the plan that really reflect that balance of preserving and protecting the open space?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So great question. Open space is a top priority to the community, and it has been since the very beginning. To answer your first question, it will absolutely be part of that discussion. We'll have Parks and Rec at the table. Certainly the developer has minimums that are required, but we are certainly encouraging for more. We're encouraging for more open space as a nod to the community to kind of satisfy some of those concerns. Just speaking to open space in the plan, it is absolutely included in the plan, and it has been since the very beginning. We have gone so far as worked with the community to identify some of the priority areas. So again, the plan doesn't define the size of the open space, but what the plan does do is we've listened to the community and we've identified areas, and there's 4 particular areas that have been identified and that are spoken to in the plan. So the first, which I brought up in my presentation, is that promenade in front of the administration building. The second is maintaining the quad. So there's a quad that is near the administration building, near Match Buff Hall. It's beautiful. If you can just picture a college campus, just think of a quad on your favorite college campus, and that's there. We've also talked today a lot about the cemetery and respecting the sacredness of the cemetery. So a third location that is of top priority is using open space as a buffer. And so full disclaimer, originally we didn't have strong enough language that actually spoke to that. So in working with the steering committee, we've since corrected that, and we ensure that open space is used as a buffer, not exploring if it can be. And then finally, the other area which is spoken to today is making sure that there are open space corridors along the western slope, if you will, so along Irving Street there in the plan area. And so really I think that the plan does a wonderful job of being as specific as possible to identify open space and really highlighting that it is of importance to the community and that it does need to be continued to be so moving forward.
Okay, additional questions? Gosha.
Just a question on the first criteria that we're supposed to consider, the inclusive community process. I think the numbers were truly impressive when you described the number of people engaged and who have taken the survey or participated in meetings. And we heard a lot from residents today, and I think we know that community is more than residents. It's also people who work in the area and visit area. The last group, people may visit the area, but they don't live there because there may not be housing available to them. So I was wondering how those groups were represented in the participation, if you can speak about it a little bit, both in terms of stakeholder committee and also respondents to the comments.
Sure. So just so I'm clear, so you're speaking about how, for instance, business owners maybe along Federal Boulevard,
people who
visitors.
work in the area
Sure.
or visit area for whatever, yes, maybe own a business or visit for travel through the area.
Sure. Yeah, so very good question. So First and foremost, we showed the statistic where we distributed thousands and thousands of flyers. So that included both within District 2 and then also District 7. And as part of that, that is Federal Boulevard. And there are a lot of local shop owners along Federal Boulevard. So we did the best that we could to incorporate those folks, make sure we got their feedback. We absolutely encourage folks to not only attend the steering committee meetings to observe the process, but also to engage in the public meetings. So we did our best with outreach along those individuals. We also recognize that you're absolutely right that it's one thing to just contact the residents that do live in the surrounding vicinity, but it's another thing that we realize this is a community center. This is a regional attraction. You can see the tower for miles, and so we realize that this site actually means a lot to people and also the folks that don't live there. So we used groups, and we worked with groups like Educa, which is through Denver Public Schools as a Spanish-speaking organization, to distribute information via radio and make sure that their schools in the area and those that had any type of connection to the area, whether it was a loved one or a friend, was made aware of these particular meetings. So we really tried to do the best that we can in terms of our outreach. The third point that I will make is, as Jenny had shown on one of the slides, we have a very robust communications department, and we do what we can with social media. And so that's another way to get the word out that, we're not only marketing this to folks that live in the area, but we encourage folks from around the city to come and participate in the process. And ultimately they did. I've met numerous folks at community meetings that, don't necessarily even live there, but, first of all, they just want to know what was going on with the campus, or maybe they had a loved one that, that attended Loretto Heights back in the day. And that's the other thing that I will kind of close with is, one thing that I've learned through this process is how many lives this campus has touched. And it's absolutely amazing that when I speak to friends and family or just random, community members, someone has some type of connection to Loretto Heights. And so I think that, even if we had not used those various outreach techniques, we still would have seen participation from folks that don't necessarily live in the area, but might work in the area or visit.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions? Perhaps I'll just follow up on one more thing regarding historic preservation. Ms. Gaytan and Mr. Ambrose both mentioned a desire for landmark districts. I don't see specifically recommended landmark districts in the plan, but I do see key open spaces, in addition to buildings, talked about for preserving, if not necessarily landmarks, such as the quad. Could you just give us a little color on how the community discussion about landmark districts went?
Sure, absolutely. So I might have Jenny come up here and kind of maybe summarize here, but I'll take a stab at this because this has been a continued conversation from the community. And essentially what we left with the community and the steering committee is we got buy-in from the larger steering committee that, at the end of the day, there needs to be options at the table. And so, one option might work for one building, it might work for another. And so that includes individual designation, that includes covenants, easements, things like that. But we also heard that a district should be an option. And so we do have a recommendation in the plan that really says that when the timing is right and when you're looking at a particular building or a particular area on the site, that maybe the district option is the best approach. And so ultimately we ended up on that with the steering committee to just make sure that all options are on the table. And that's essentially what we have. So it is in the plan as a type of tool that can be used down the road, and it should be used down the road if it is appropriate. So Jenny, I don't know if you want to add any more to that or.
So yeah, I think, based on the feedback that we had received, the overarching desire or vision was to preserve and reuse the historic structures on the campus. And you can do that in a variety of ways through the tools that we list within the area plan. All of those tools can achieve that outcome. So we wanted to maintain some flexibility and a number of options to be able to achieve that goal and not just limit it to one. And the plan, as Jason mentioned, does not remove the option for historic districts designation at the local level. That is still included in there, as well as individual designation if that seems to be the best fit as well. And as as John had mentioned from Historic Denver, there are conversations right now about easements being placed on some of the buildings as short-term protection measures that could then lead to a historic district or individual structure designation at the local level.
Thank you. So all those tools will be considered. Thank you. Okay. Last questions. Yes.
I have a question, and it may not have an answer, but it's for West Side. We talked, or you talked a little bit about detail coming down the road, and I just have a couple questions about really the range of the Metro District tool. It was mentioned in the public comment about affordable housing, and in my perspective, sometimes what has been or what seems like it's a pool of affordable housing is not, and it's not accessible. And so in terms of the content and the range of a metro district, I know infrastructure was mentioned, but are some of the elements that might support accessible housing and affordable housing be included? That's the first question. And the second would be, in terms of the legacy, this site is pretty unique. We've talked about opportunities, and I think it would be important to have that legacy represented in some of the elements of the site, including like multi-generational and opportunities to continue that legacy and those opportunities. Are any of those things achievable within a metro district range, or if not, will they be in the development plan?
Great question. So again, Mark Witkevich, Westside Investment Partners Principal, and I'm happy to answer all of your questions. As it relates to metropolitan districts and what the funds can be used for, they cannot be used for private development, and I just want to be really clear about that. So are we saying that we're going to use metropolitan district funds to do affordable housing? You can't. What you can do is you can help put the infrastructure in play as to be able to do developments, such as an affordable housing project. I do recognize the importance and the need for affordable housing in this community and anywhere. And actually, it's a national problem. Let's all be honest with ourselves. And I do understand that there is some concern, is this a bait and switch scenario where we're going to promise one thing and then have our fingers crossed behind our backs and deliver something else. I get it. In fact, I'm so confident that I took the first step forward, with Jim Hartman, who you heard from earlier today, to say that, hey, Pancratia Hall is important to this community. We're going to keep it, and we're going to do historic tax credits on it. And when you talk to the building, it wants to be a residential project. So we made the announcement ahead of anybody asking us to make an announcement on an affordable housing project, because we want to build the trust not only of the community, but of the city, that we hear you, both from a historic standpoint and also from an affordable standpoint. We also know that from a historic tax credit perspective and also from a low-income housing tax credit perspective, they don't happen overnight, okay? It's a drag. It's a lot of work and effort to make those things happen. So what we're able to do with Pancratia, as one example, is we're able to pull that forward. Now, that's going to supply 68 units, okay? That's a fact. That's going to also provide for 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. It's not just one 3-bedroom unit. There are, I believe, 17 3-bedroom units that are going to be in there. We're targeting a 30 to 80% through Jim Hartman as far as the AMI, and that's happening. The capital stack is put together. In fact, Jim Hartman told me earlier today that he did, I should say, actually got the LIHTC's approval just today or yesterday, I believe. So that's happening. So it's not a bait and switch. And I want to be really clear about that. And what I asked Planning Board, and what I'm also going to ask the community as we're going through this LDR process, is I get credit for that. What I'm afraid of is that we're going to start the LDR process, and they're going to say, that's great, now what are you going to do? Okay? So I'm expecting credit for that, but I'm not stopping there either. Because when we start talking about a multi-generational component to this project, it is important to us. One of the things that I know that everybody has heard me say from the steering committee standpoint is that not only is this going to be a mixed-use project, it's going to be mixed income. And now the newest thing is that we want to talk about is mixed generations as well. I heard so many times, from communities, and I've been in their house, where they have signs on their doors, please help shovel. And they want to stay in the community, but the houses that they live in are becoming hard, for them to maintain. And plus, we need to open those homes up to new families to move in. But there's no place for the seniors to go. And I'm not ready to make an announcement, but I can tell you from an inside little sneak peek, the next thing that we're working on is a senior affordable housing project for this project. And we want to bring it together. It's not done, and we have a tremendous amount of work to make it happen, but that's the next direction that we're going as well. So it's not a bait and switch. Do we want unaffordable housing there too? Absolutely. We want people to have disposable income that are spending money on site. I don't think that you make a village by having the norm be one side or the other. You make a village by creating a village of mixed use and mixed income and multi-generation. I hopefully answered your question.
You did.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for board deliberation. Don.
I believe this easily satisfies the three criteria. I will be supporting it. I will say, just in passing, it's natural for everybody to want more details at this part of the process. Density, traffic. Denver has learned the painful lesson that when you try to answer that question now, you get it wrong every time. And we end up fixing that. A lot of our business is fixing the over-prescriptiveness of things like that that were done in the past that just didn't work over time. So there's a whole sequence of things. So there's a large development review, there's zoning that'll have to come before us, there's site planning, there's development agreements, there's historic designations. There is a sequence in which the details come into focus, and we actually have a pretty good system for that, and there's a public engagement in all of those steps, almost all of those steps. And so while I'm sympathetic to, we really don't know exactly what's going to be done. That's just the nature of planning. I think this is a good plan, and it's the kind of foundation that will allow us take and engage in those next steps very thoughtfully and get the right kind of development.
Andrew.
First, I want to thank everyone for coming down and speaking. All of your perspectives are very well received, and it really is great to hear the community speak up. I think the plan itself is really well, and I think it's a really exciting opportunity for the community. There's, one thing I want to note on is just, one speaker came down and talked about, hey, we want to make this a community and have that livability for teachers and policemen and, jobs of that nature. And I want to continue to kind of reiterate and push towards the difference also between people use affordability in a lot of different terms. I like to use affordability and attainability as kind of two different terms. Most often I hear affordability on kind of that average median income and percentages, which is really valuable. Also, attainability being just, hey, what can my neighbor or the teacher afford to actually purchase? And I think creating different multi-housing forms can create a lot of opportunity for different individuals. And then I also really do believe in home ownership as well. And so for this document, it's not something that would naturally go in there, but as the process continues, both on the affordable and the attainable components, I would continue to push for sale units because that does help that multi-generational wealth, limiting displacement, aging in place, and things of that nature. So I've been very encouraged with the updates and the process that it's been taken, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Erin.
I too want to thank you all for coming here today, for taking time out of your day, and including those who don't live in the area now, but just who have a connection to this campus and who care about it. Thank you for participating in this process, and I think that speaks to, as my colleague Gosha mentioned, just the inclusivity of this process. And so I too think that this very much meets the criteria that we are tasked with reviewing this plan by. I just want to note a couple of things. One is that I want to echo what Don said in terms of this is a process. This is not the only time. We're not approving Westside Investment Partners development here today. This is an area plan for an area, a larger area, and the vision for what should be seen there. We, as a planning board, use documents like this to then, when there are more detailed plans that come forward, like a rezoning request, we then measure those against a plan like this. And so what I'm particularly liking in this plan that I haven't seen before, but I think is helpful, is that often we look at plans that have been been approved in prior years, and we're trying to kind of guess at what people really were looking for. And here we have some very specific guidance that says, for example, due to the community's concerns about through traffic and negative impacts of traffic, this plan recommends prevention of an unobstructed vehicular connection of Dartmouth Avenue. That's the type of thing that I think just having some of that color in this plan that speaks to exactly what was coming out from the community and what that perspective was, and that, because what we've heard consistently here today is that that's the type of thing that this community does not want to see. I'm reading that clearly in this plan. This is as clear as I've ever seen it put into a plan, and that gives us guidance in the future to understand kind of what the neighbors really wanted to see. And so I just think that to some of the concerns that we heard about Dartmouth going through, I read this, I immediately started kind of searching for Dartmouth Avenue in the plan and see it a number of places couched in that way that says, because the community said they don't want this, this is not going to happen. And so I just want to make that clear. And then some of the other concerns that we heard from the Loretto Heights Community Initiative, for example, these I think we've talked about are issues that will come as the more with later specific site development activities, and there will be public hearings around those things and community meetings attached to those things. I am sympathetic to the frustration that can come with knowing that we're looking at this broad plan and we don't get to look at it in detail at density and at and have traffic studies. And as someone who used to be a planner in California, where as a matter of state law, those things do come in at this level, but that's unique to that state. That's not how we do things in Colorado, and that's not how we can do things here in the city of Denver. And so I just want to make it clear that it's not that anyone is saying that that's not important, but it will come into the process, just not at this stage. So based on all of that, and again, because I think that this does meet the criteria that we are specifically tasked with evaluating this by, I will be in support.
Other comments? Yes.
I just wanted to also thank everyone for coming, because there were many perspectives expressed here, from housing to open space to traffic, and it is that criteria of a long-term view and having adopted policy that those issues would not be reflected in this plan had you not participated. And it is really important that they're in the specificity that Aaron mentioned, so that when a rezoning comes along, we have that criteria. What will continue to be important then is that you continue to be involved, so that those voices are clear. So I think that we have, through the LDR process, not just the details in the plan, but through the processes that are ahead, plenty of opportunity for input to happen, and for us to weigh that against in terms of traffic calming, open space, and preservation. So I have trust in that process, and I also wanted to thank Jason and staff for the good work on this project. I will be supporting this.
Yes, very quickly. Again, thank you everybody for coming. I hear your concerns about traffic and traffic calming. As a past pedestrian advocate, I can promise you that I'll be looking for and watching for the traffic calming and pedestrian-friendly streets and bike-friendly streets. I will support the plan. There's one component that gives me a little bit of pause. I just want to comment in regards to criteria 2 and 3. 3 out of 8 housing recommendations in Blueprint Denver mention ADUs or missing middle housing. I think there was opportunity here to incorporate some of those gradual density, especially thinking about the long-term view that I recognize there's a current single-family zoning, but looking ahead 10, 15 years, it would have been nice to embrace those ideas. But hearing the amount of community support, I do believe that this plan reflects the community vision and is a regional asset, so I will support it. Thank you.
Oh, certainly.
No, I was just going to offer to make a motion, but you...
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. This meets the criteria. I just want to speak to a couple things. First, in item 1, about the inclusive community process. Certainly all the people who've participated in all the meetings, drawn by extensive public outreach, multi-jurisdictional outreach is impressive. And then as evidenced by the RNOs and other organizations who weighed in, the Harvey Park with conditional approval, Dartmouth Heights with a conditional approval, and saw the South Marlee RNO, Sisters of Loretto, City of Sheridan, the Vietnamese American Community of Colorado. All these organizations, in addition to individuals, took a lot of time to study this, and their support matters and demonstrates the inclusive community process. When it comes to the next criteria of consistency with adopted plans, we've just completed Comp Plan and Blueprint Denver, and this is not the first, but one of the first plans to come through, and under that, and point by point, refers to those plans and brings in the goals of aligning future growth for the next 20 years with where we have transit, right along Federal Boulevard. Makes a lot of sense. Vision Zero, we need to stop the deaths on the streets and the serious injuries on the streets, and that's woven throughout this plan. So many of our high-level plans are finding specificity in this plan. That's what we look for. Thank you to Councilman Flynn and Councilman Clark for leading this from the council perspective and making sure the community showed up and they knew they were being listened to. I think this is an excellent, excellent plan and a model for how the city can quickly, I know it took a year, but quickly reprioritize efforts to say, there's the opportunity for change. Let's make sure that change is consistent with our values and consistent with our land use and transportation plan in specific. And rather than saying someday in the course of time we'll get a neighborhood plan in this area, they said let's take a specific area and do focused planning. And on that last point, I think it sort of addresses what my colleague Gosha Kung mentioned. In my understanding, the study area is larger here in this plan than the area really receiving recommendations for land use change. That is, the broader area that's drawn really wasn't studied for a lot of land use change. It was studied for how the land uses interact with one another. So some of the single-family neighborhoods, I wouldn't expect recommendations for change there because that really wasn't the focus. It was just an influence area, by which I mean when the NPI process comes and plans in this area, I expect those neighborhoods are being asked the same questions that every neighborhood will be asked. How can this be a more complete neighborhood? But I don't think it's a deficiency in this plan that those peripheral areas in the study area, but not the focus, didn't have land use recommendation changes. So with that, I'm happy to support it. And who would like to make a motion? Aaron?
I move to approve the Loretto Heights area plan, finding that the applicable review criteria have been met with the following condition: that the planning board review draft be edited for clarity, correctness, illustrative graphics, section references, and other non-substantive matters, as well as any other changes to the planning board draft made necessary by such edits.
I'll second.
Been moved by Aaron and seconded by Andrew. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.